Fighting a wrestling war means many a thing, but at its core, you need the right booker for the right time and the right talent for the time. If you have one or the other, you can find yourself in choppy water. If you have neither, well, just set all that money on fire and go about your day. Historically speaking, I'm Matt Ryan, and this is the next chapter in our story of the first national wrestling promotion and where it all went wrong. For the IWA in 1975, the question of who would be a tougher question than the why. In a time where wrestlers grew like wild weeds across better lawns and gardens of America, Eddie Einhorn and the Martinezes had a chance to collect some of the greatest names in the history of the sport. Since 1984, when the first shots in the war to settle Vince's score were shot, the time-honored traditions in wrestling regarding talent signing and poaching were treated less and less like traditions and more like objects easily moved on a chessboard. Even with the development of written contracts and agreements in an industry where up until 20 to 25 years ago, your deal would be $20 for TV and a hope your exposure bucks would yield to actual dollars. In a similar situation to what Kevin Nash and Scott Hall were dealing with in 1996, a majority of the top stars in the industry were dealing with the lack of guaranteed money and dates dating back to 1975 and beyond. Einhorn looked to resolve this problem. Einhorn, understanding both the world of sports and television, looked to utilize the guaranteed contracts that would pay talent for their work on top of gate receipts. While enticing for an industry full of Wild West humans with questionable ethics, morality, and an understanding of any and all legal contracts, many of the top stars were deathly afraid of crossing the industry's established promoters, mainly the National Wrestling Alliance. By 1975, the NWA held unquestionable authority over nearly every aspect of the pro wrestling business, even having friendly, if not tense, relations with the WWF and AWA as everybody minded their respective territories. And jumping to a company that did not have an allegiance to those three letters usually meant the end of your career, especially if you were running in that same territory from the place you just jumped to. But there was precedent. Just a few years prior, there was a massive wrestling war in Atlanta with an entire locker room, save for one person, shifting from the NWA office to the All-South office following Ann Gunkel getting Booker Tom Renesto to come with her from the NWA-fronted outfit ran by Gunkel's former partners. This brings us back to the most central character in this gong show apparently, George Scott. As we've outlined an inordinate amount of times this season, Mid-Atlantic was at a tipping point in 1975, and Scott's knowledge of not just the Carolinas, but how to establish a booking system for a national promotion made him the belle of the ball. If Scott goes at the top of 1975, we discussed a partial list of names, but you had Ric Flair, Ole and Gene Anderson, Wahoo McDaniel, Blackjack Mulligan, Johnny Valentine, young Jerry Blackwell, Rufus R. Jones, Sonny King, and others like Ivan Koloff.
There'll be a fantastic wrestling card at the Hampton Roads Coliseum tonight. But on Thursday night, the Bounty Hunter of the Super Destroyer will meet Sonny King. But tonight at Hampton Roads Coliseum, Sonny King will finish off Johnny Valentine, and then Paul Jones will meet Ivan Koloff in a Russian chain match.
Paul Jones, you want to wrestle Koloff? You chase Koloff all over. You want match with Koloff? Nah, Paul Jones. You'll get match with Koloff. Russian chain match. Koloff wrestle many times. Russian chain match, always win. Paul Jones, after Koloff hit you on head, choke you, Paul Jones. You be in hospital. No more, Paul Jones. Only Koloff. Paul Jones, you be sorry. Koloff kill you.
Mr. Valentine, champ,
I just love to see people beat with chains and whips, and I'm going to enjoy that match. Now, I have a match with Sonny King. He's going to want to do something to me, but he's going to be disappointed. I really feel pity for his brother, Bearcat Wright, who's out of wrestling, who is hurt, injured, partly because of my bounty. I know Destroyer was thinking of money when he did it. I saw him hit him with that chair over and over again, and I think there was more than just wrestling involved, there was money involved. Well, it's done. Now I have to pay, so they say. Well, I'm not going to pay with my body because Sonny King is going to have to pay again, and his poor family is going to lose too. Not only will Bearcat be out on some poor street selling pencils, his brother will be sitting right alongside of him because they'll both be out of wrestling. I don't intend to have anyone touch this body.
And beyond that, you had young Kevin Sullivan and Steve Kern who were getting some of their earlier breaks in the business. And loyalty tended to land with bookers over promoters, as bookers would be more inclined to bring an overact with them to a bigger or different territory after their run ended, especially if you're running opposition, instead of hoping to be kept by a new booker who had his crew of talent. But the Crockett's were a family that instilled a lot of loyalty and talent, as we would see in later years, and may have been able to have thrived without Scott minding the store the same way Jim Jr. was able to mind the company, albeit briefly, following the departure of John Ringley. Both happening at the same time would have been an interesting beat, but we did not end up in that universe. And Georgia was the jewel of the NWA crown, with Bill Watts acting as the heart of the booking under the guidance of not only Jim Barnett, the promoter, but also Florida's Eddie Graham, who'd insert both Watts and Jerry Jarrett amidst the Georgia War to help bolster the creative output on WTCG and the house shows within the loop. Hell, it featured a young Jerry Lawler with his first partner Don Green, Bob Armstrong, the only man not to jump 4 years earlier, Jack and Jerry Briscoe, who would play a very active role in what would come just 9 years later in what would later be known as Black Saturday. Einhorn would have either broken open the facade of the NWA's constraints on wrestling economics and territorial control, or found himself in the middle of a viper's nest of both top talent and top minds counteracting everything they were doing. If you were looking at the IWA the same way others looked at the AFL, WHA, ABA, and WFA, the latter of which Einhorn was a part of being the syndicator of their games on TVS, you saw the success of offering bigger money deals to stars of all ages and impact due to the market they were in. Who would be the Bobby Hull? Who would be the Gordie Howe, Billy Cannon, Dr. J, or even Larry Zonka of ICW? The best possible option, or the most consistent but most transient type of star there was in the 1970s, a top heel. While many acts would homestead, it would be mostly the top babyface and their associates, usually the promoter and or booker and his buddies, who would be the names and faces you see more often than anyone else. Because, well, they weren't going to hold up the promoter for money or leave them high and dry. There would be exceptions, like in East Tennessee, where the Wright brothers, primarily Ron Wright, would be mainstays in that part of the country regardless of the promoter, booker, booking office, or organization that came through those parts. For Einhorn and Martinez, they would find two men willing to make the jump with that kind of cachet, and two with enough history and notoriety to make waves in the industry. In the 1970s, there were rare names bigger than Ivan Koloff and Ernie Ladd. Koloff, just 4 years prior, was the man who ended the iconic championship reign of Bruno Sammartino, leaving Madison Square Garden dead silent as their hero lay there beaten by the Russian Bear. It also helped a great deal that Koloff was not only in Mid-Atlantic in 1975, but held their television title at the time Einhorn and Martinez reached out with their offer. We now go to Koloff's recollection of the events via his book, Is That Wrestling Fake?, published by Scott Teal's Crowbar Press, an invaluable resource for wrestlers and wrestling fans. On February 8, 1975, I got a call from Pedro Martinez. Pedro had been a wrestling promoter for many years, primarily in the Buffalo territory, but he had been a partner with Tootsmont in New York City. Pedro wanted to talk to me about going to work for a new wrestling promotion. I'm going to be starting a new promotion with a guy named Eddie Einhorn. He has a lot of money and wants to get into the business. We're going to start promoting in the Northeast, but we'll eventually go nationwide. I always looked at wrestling as a free enterprise. Although I always knew that Vince McMahon Sr. ran the Northeast territory, I never thought he should have had a monopoly. In fact, I never thought any promoter should be able to monopolize any area. When Pedro called and offered me $1,500 a week, trans, twice what I was making in Charlotte, and a 6-month contract with the option of renewing, it didn't take me long to make my decision. I was so convinced they would make it that I told George Scott about my plans that very night in Greensboro, North Carolina. When I got George on the side, I told him I've been contacted by another organization and I'll be leaving in a couple of weeks. He was upset. What about the belt? At the time, I was the Mid-Atlantic TV champion. I was scheduled to defend the title against Paul Jones later that evening, so I said, I'll drop it to Paul Jones tonight if you want. 9 days later, on February 17th in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Koloff and the ever-popular Thunderbolt Patterson would headline the first ever IWA card. More on that and T-Bolt in just a bit.
You know, I wasn't, I was just approached just within a couple weeks of going to them. I didn't know anything about it. I heard that they're coming into the area and that they still have Pedro Martinez, of course, I knew from Buffalo promotion up there in Buffalo, New York. And but I didn't hear nothing. I got a call one day that, hey, they wanted me over in that organization, and the deal that I had with Crockett, they were willing to double it, and I didn't really have much of a deal with Crockett, so just more or less said I was brought in, and if I drew, they put me in the main event. If I didn't draw, that's about the way it was in wrestling anyway.
But you had a special contract, right? Like $2,000 a week?
Yeah, that's the way they did it. But they did it for a 6-month thing, and I should have went by 6 months. I should have went for at least a year, because it moved like that. Hindsight now, looking back, it should have been something that I negotiated a longer period of time.
That last little bit from Gary Cubetta's 57talk.com interview with Ivan Koloff, which we will be using as a resource over these next couple episodes. While Koloff may not have been the biggest fish in the Mid-Atlantic pond, the Martinezes and Einhorn signed one of the biggest names out of their base of operations, and the only man to have beaten Bruno Sammartino since he defeated Buddy Rogers to win the WWF title. And at $1,500, before trans, before taxes, double what he was making across town for the Crockett's, would in 2025 equal $9,216 a week. Damn. And Koloff would not be the only Mid-Atlantic mainstay to make the jump, as Ric Flair's mentor/manager, the first partner he had in the Carolinas, Rip Hawk, and George Becker, who were consistent talents in the area during Jim Sr.'s run, would also make the jump.
Fans, let me remind you, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, tomorrow 3 p.m., Asheville, North Carolina. In Anderson, South Carolina, Thursday, August 1st, you're going to see Johnny Valentine, Tommy Sigler, Rip Hawk, Sonny King, and others. Spartanburg, South Carolina tonight, Johnny Valentine and Ivan Koloff against Paul Jones and Tiger Conway Jr., Tommy Sigler, Nelson Royal, and others. And of course, this coming Monday night, right here at the Green Mill Memorial Auditorium, Sweet Hansen and Tiger Conway Jr. against you, Rip Hawk, and your partner, Ric Flair.
Well, all I've got to say is that the people in Greenville know what happened. Swede, I don't know why you feel that you're so superior to everyone else. After all, look what I've done for you. I made you what you are today, and you went out and you tried to double-cross me. The people don't know what a two-timing double-crosser this Swede is. So I had a new partner, Ric Flair. I tried to get Swede on our side. He wouldn't listen, so he had to wrestle Ric Flair. He was out to maim this man, Ric Flair. But Swede, I got you. And I got you pretty good, but not good enough. The next time, which is Monday night, you're going to get a lesson you'll never forget, and I'll guarantee that. And I got a man right here that's going to guarantee it.
You got a man right here. You got Mr.
From the Atlanta territory, Thunderbolt Patterson, a man who more often than not quarreled with the management in the Atlanta NWA office, even into the 1990s when it would be WCW running things.
But to Toronto, you've been there, Thunderbolt, a couple times, but you haven't really been back like you're going to be back. You're just getting warmed up, Thunderbolt, right here in Toronto at the Maple Leaf Gardens. In other words, that old saying, they ain't seen nothing yet.
They ain't seen nothing yet. You know, like, it's the Sheik. You know, it's some things that's going on that it just gets under my skin.
Yeah, and the Sheik is one of them,
and he's one to get on that one nerve that I have. And people, let me tell you something. We're going to get down. I know y'all might look at me in a little, not knowing what's going on here, but you ain't never seen nothing like it before.
They may not know what to expect, but they're going to find out, right?
We're going to get funky.
That's it.
We're going to get funky. We're going to get down. I want y'all to put the names down, because I'm going to collect.
You're going to collect the revenue for him. The Sheik is number one, though. Let's put him down on your list, number one.
The Sheik is a number one. Then they got a sergeant. Somebody they call him sergeant. Then they got a dog. You know, like, hey, man, let me tell you
about him.
Let me tell you something first. Let me tell you what I'm really after. You know, I'm him, but I'm chasing that Sheik all over the world. I got to leave the United States, and I got to, you got
to leave the country to do it.
I am so full. People, I want to tell you something. I mean, I want y'all to bear with me, because when I get down, you ain't never seen nothing funky like this before.
And you're telling the people here in Toronto that if you say the Sheik must fall, he will go down because you mean business and you're going to take care of it. You're going to see it through.
I ain't playing with nothing and nobody. And ain't nobody going to do a... Ooh, I wish I could talk like that.
They ain't going to do anything to you anymore. They've already done all they can do to you.
I have paid my dues. Now I'm going to collect on some of them.
Put it right there.
Solid, brother.
He would be joined by the controversial Jim Wilson, who we discussed on the show previously, and the Mongols, featuring a soon-to-be iconic in Atlanta and beyond Bill Eadie, who would be known as the Masked Superstar and later Acts of Demolition. The Mongols, who were reformed in Atlanta and then later reformed in Japan, were to be the base of the tag team division of the IWA, with Montreal standouts Gino Brito and Dino Bravo acting as the babyface tandem set to take the world by storm. It was the International Wrestling Alliance after all. Hell, they went for the biggest international star they could aim for. Well, they got him. See, in 1975, Mil Mascaras was a pretty big deal, not just because he was the man of 1,000 masks, but because he had broken away from EMLL the year prior and was starting the new year with a new promotion. Mascaras was set to be the star of Lucha Libre International, which would be later shortened to Lucha Libre International, or LLI, utilizing the sanctioning body name of the Universal Wrestling Association, who would be giving guaranteed money to talent along with a percentage of the gates. Feels vaguely familiar. And with EMLL being the only game in town and the only game with the NWA connections, Mascaras and the UWA would find friends and opportunity in Einhorn and the IWA. Not only would be Mascaras the top star of the IWA, he would be their world champion, going around the world in IWA events, defending the crown along with dates in Mexico. One of which would see him put the belt up against Lou Thez, but again, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. And with the fluid nature of wrestling and talent coming in and out of a place, our last two names are going to be outside the timeline. But the next, and one could say last influential name to touch down in the IWA, would be a month after its debut, as Ernie Ladd would move from working Detroit and Indianapolis for the Bruiser and the Sheik, the latter who had taken over the NWF's lease at the Cleveland Masonic Temple, running their first show, which featured Ernie Ladd and Johnny Powers beating Baron Von Krupp and Karl Von Hess, just over a week after Ladd and Powers would beat Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik in the final NWF event in the same building. Time is a flat circle in this business, I swear to God. Ladd, one of the most formidable college football defenders, was less than a decade removed from a stellar AFL career that would see him win a title with the San Diego Chargers in 1963 and earn 4 All-Star appearances and 3 first-team AFL honors. But it was the ring where Ladd would find a calling in the field almost immediately while working in Los Angeles as a member of the Chargers. After seeing more opportunities and more money in wrestling, Ladd would make the full-time move in 1969, soon becoming one of the most reviled heels in pro wrestling because of his dynamic and adversarial promo style. But Ladd would also become one of the top draws because of that adversarial promo style, making over $100,000 a year just in his first 2 full-time years in the business, dwarfing what he made in the AFL, which was paying more than the NFL was at the time, especially for defensive talent. Ladd made the right move not only for himself, but for fans of him getting a chance to witness promos like this.
Andre the Giant is 7 feet 4 inches tall, 485 pounds, but Ernie Ladd is also a very big man, 6'9", 326 pounds, and Ernie Ladd is the North American heavyweight champion. But Andre the Giant seems to relish that North American championship belt more than he does the world championship.
Well, Reese, the reason Andre the Dummy wants me so bad because I beat him in Los Angeles. He goes around telling people that he's never been beat, which is a lie. We were in a couple of Battle Royals for 2-3 years. Andre the Giant never lost a Battle Royal, but I decided to enter some of the Battle Royals that Andre the Dummy was in, and I beat that dummy several times in Battle Royals. Now, he feel as though he could really hurt me if he could get a shot at the North American title and take my belt. But Andre the Dummy, you got a shot. The only shot you're going to get right in your mouth. Your big mouth. And I've beat you on several occasions, and I will beat you again. And if you stand in my face and call me a liar, I'll slap your face real good in the general public. Going around telling people that you've never been beat before. I want you in the square circle worse than you want to get in the square circle. I will slap your face and whoop your family real good for all my fans, anytime, anywhere, big boy. Don't call me out because I am the true champion. I just get so sick down inside it make me want to throw up just thinking about how bad I would like to slap your face. I would slap your face in the presence of your parents, less known in the presence of all the fans, and pin you again, dummy.
As is tradition here on Historically Speaking, I'm 90% through an edit when I find/remind myself of something involving someone on this show. And shout out to the person who didn't like our tangents here on Historically Speaking, who watched last week's episode, but we're going to go back to 1969. Ernie Ladd in his second full year as a pro wrestler, missing out on the Kansas City Chiefs in their quest to win Super Bowl IV. Let's go back to America's game and Ernie Ladd shaving for Coach Stram.
Ernie Ladd was one of the amazing human beings that anybody would ever hope to meet. Here's a guy that was 6'9", 305 pounds. He had retired from the Chiefs under very good stead, and then he went into professional wrestling. He was the Big Cat, I think was his name, his moniker. So anyway, he comes for the Super Bowl. He asked Hank if he could be on the sideline for the Super Bowl, and Hank said, yeah, but you've got to shave your mustache, you've got to shave your sideburns. He had sideburns coming all the way down and then a Fu Manchu type thing, because that's part of your wrestling shtick, I guess, at that time.
Hank had a rule, and that was no facial hair. And with the rule being no facial hair, he had to share with Ernie that for him to be on the sideline, he had to cut his hair. And that was not on his head, but on his face and his beard and his mustache. So Ernie complied, and that was how he was able to be on the sideline during the course of the game.
Yeah.
Did you see when Mo Mama come back cut some legs?
Yeah.
That's what he was doing. He was shaving in the locker room at the Super Bowl before he went out on the field. Then he put on a Kansas City Chiefs red jacket, and he was on the sidelines for the whole Super Bowl.
Yeah, got to be out of that guard. Same thing happened up in Minnesota a year ago. I'm chasing Joe Cap. Buck passed by me, and then Aaron Brown passed by him and crushed him. Same thing. What can I tell you?
Ladd's arrival would soon see him partner with Thunderbolt Patterson upon his debut, as they would battle Bulldog Brower and Ivan Koloff on March 9th, just under a month removed from Ladd falling to IWA roster member Ox Baker in his final appearance for the WWA in Indianapolis. The last one would be a man who almost could have pulled the pin out of the whole grenade for the IWA, because on one summer night, just before one of the biggest events in IWA history, at Jersey City's Roosevelt Stadium, George Crybaby Cannon, on the word of Einhorn and the Martinezes, tried to poach friend George the Animal Steele the night before he would main event Madison Square Garden and face Bruno Sammartino, and instead make his way to Jersey City and join the IWA. This may be a story for another day, but the table is now set for this war to go from theory to reality. The players central to the story now explained, the landscape of pro wrestling codified. On our next edition of Historically Speaking, we see how the IWA went from a visionary's pipe dream to a well-syndicated reality, and the realities of a well-funded syndication going against local institutions, and how Vince McMahon should have learned from what we were about to work through. Historically Speaking is a presentation of Ember Media and the Intergalactic Sports Network. Hopefully we'll see you next time.